Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to another week of the Live Life Progressive Show. This is Sincere Hogan. Got Mike Mahler on the other side of the line. What's up, dude?
I'm doing great, man. I can't wait to talk to our guest. He's an expert on so many things that I'm trying to improve upon.
Yeah.
So not only will I get a lot out of this episode, the listeners are going to love what he has to say as well. Yeah. So we're going to get to him in a second. Before we introduce him, just want to say thank you to those of you that are using that coupon code LLA to get 10% off anything you see at my website, mikemahler.com. We've got Carly Golightly, and Carly said that her boyfriend got her addicted to the show.
Okay.
That he introduced.
Good job, boyfriend. Good job.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a trend we need to encourage.
Exactly, because everybody feels like this is such a guy show, and it's not. Per se.
Well, I don't care about that. I just want to improve our numbers. So if every guy who listens gets his wife or girlfriend to listen, bam, we're going to improve our numbers big time. I don't care about trying to prove feminazis wrong or say, we've got women who like the show.
Hell, definitely not talking about them.
Let's see. We got Joseph Wood. We got Alan Condon, Nathan White, Eric Anderson, Robert Tracy, Sandip Singh, James Hendershot, Stephen Costello, and Garen Clark. They're all using that coupon code LLA to get 10% off some great products.
Yeah, Garen's another guy. One of these have to get Garen on the show. He's another guy who's putting up some amazing numbers, but not only just for his, for his size and also for his age. He's really putting it out there for guys who like to use the excuse, when you get my age, you can't do all that stuff and you got to start, you can hurt your back, blah, blah. Here's a guy that's reversing the aging process, man. And I've watched this guy the last few years. We met in the kettlebell sport world, but he's gone on to compete in powerlifting and things like that. And his numbers are very impressive. Definitely one of these days we definitely have to get Garen on there, man. And very impressed with your products as well. I mean, I know he's a fan, big time. So.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's been a regular customer for a while. And also, as a bonus, after we finish talking to our guest today, stick around because I'm going to add some clarity to this whole Jon Jones situation. For those of you that are UFC fans, real quick, he posted positive for 2 estrogen blockers, as they're described in the media, and no one has explained why he may have taken this combination, how they could have ended up in tainted supplements. So I'm going to cut through all that nonsense, explain it very clearly. So make sure
somebody actually knows what they're talking about on this subject. What?
I'm not even an expert on this topic, but I definitely know more than anyone I've heard talk about it. So I feel obligated to at least clarify a few things, and then we can get someone like Anthony Roberts on, assuming we still care about this topic.
Exactly.
In a couple of weeks, which we probably won't.
Right.
All right. Without further ado, we've got Eric Cressey on the line today, top strength coach. He's written hundreds of articles, including places such as T Nation, Men's Fitness, you name it. He's been there. And not only is he an elite strength coach, he's extremely strong himself, which is a combination I always like seeing. You want to see someone who practices what he preaches, and he definitely does that. He weighed 165 and deadlifted 650 at a powerlifting event. He's also squatted 540, benched 400. So, all of his numbers are ridiculously impressive. In particular, I find his deadlift technique really engaging because it's exactly what I want my deadlift technique to look like. So we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other things. Eric, how you doing today, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, man.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, I want to talk to you about the deadlift in particular because anyone who's watched your clips on YouTube, it seems like it doesn't matter how heavy the weight is, you move it really fast. There's a clip of you moving 600 pounds for 3 reps, and each rep is lightning fast. There's no sticking point. You're not getting stuck below the knee or above the knee and then grinding it out. It's just in the pocket the whole time. Is that something you had to really train for? Did you do assistance exercises for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a big proponent of speed deadlifts actually for a long time, and always been really, really responsive to doing a lot of work in kind of that 65 to 85% range. Anywhere from 1 to 3 reps, but just making the bar speed really good. Sometimes pulling against bands, pulling against chains. But it actually happened when I was first getting going. I was still lifting in the juniors. I was probably 23, and I was lifting an APF meet at 165, and the American record, I think, was 578.5. And I'll never forget it. I look back on the video and I set up to the bar, I got down, and I could have written a dissertation while I was down, getting ready at the bar.
Yeah.
And I picked it up, and no joke, it was an 18-second lift.
I saw that clip. Yeah, I saw it.
I've got it up there, and you can actually see the head judge yelling at me to put it down, and I wouldn't give up, and all this. And I look back on it, and I'm like, there's no athleticism to that pull. It if you don't get a bar off the floor quickly, you're not going to finish the lift. So it was kind of like an aha moment for me where I'm like, I got to go and I got to train bar speed. If I'm going to make a lift, it's got to be fast off the floor. And that's something that I just kind of rededicated myself to. And it was interesting. That was in that year I took, I'd pulled a world record at 165 in the juniors. I think it was like 567 and a half at 165. And in that subsequent year, my pull went from like 567 all the way up to like 628, which at the time is a big improvement at that body weight. And that also being like my kind of my best lift anyway. So, it was definitely proof in the pudding that speed deadlifts were where it's at. And I've used them a lot for a long time thereafter.
Yeah, in that clip, the first thing I noticed is that your setup, as you said, you're taking a long time. You grab the bar, you're down there forever. And I noticed in another training clip, you talk about how that's one of the big amateur mistakes that beginners make is they set up and they're down there for way too long. And there's no way the bar is going to come off fast the longer you stay down there.
Yeah, and none of that. You're kind of screwing with your own mind. The longer you're down there, the more you have time to think about other stuff. It's like get your head
right,
dip, grip, and rip.
Yeah, the more you have time to think about what you're attempting to do.
Absolutely.
If you just dip and drive, as one of my coaches, Mark Phillippe, said, he goes, you want to drop your hips and then drive that bar off immediately.
Yeah, absolutely.
The time between the two.
And I've changed a lot of things. Like I had like a little bit of like a heel stomp when I first got going, and I've gotten away from that. And just
me too.
Me
too. I used to do that.
Simplified, that's the name of the game.
My friend Peter Roust is like, do that stomp right before you lift. And I started doing it, and I got a lot of other people to do it too.
Yeah, right? I got it from Mike, and I was like,
and then I stopped doing it because I felt like it was a distraction.
Yeah, I was like, this is.
I'm getting myself all amped up, and then I just dissipated energy before I've even done the lift.
The timing is just the hardest part. You're just trying to get so much stuff synced up that there's more errors that you can make. So when in doubt, it's like everything else in life, simplify.
Right, and then also, you don't do the bar roll. Have you ever experimented with that, where you roll the bar towards your shins, and then the second it touches, you rip it off the ground?
Yeah, I've seen guys that do that, and again, for me, it was one more kind of added piece that just made the movement a little bit more complex. That seems to be really, really popular with big lifters, guys. And I think there's some of those guys that have a little bit more weight to kind of counterbalance the load. So maybe they're people that pull with lower hips and kind of sit back. But I'm like a $180 first thing in the morning right now, and I'm like long arms and long legs, and I think maybe it's just that my build is a little bit different, and taking away some of those moving parts has really helped me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one because I have long arms as well. So for me to roll that thing is like, okay, why? You're just sitting there waiting for it to kind of get there.
Exactly.
So it gives you time to think about other stuff like, okay, dude, are you really gonna lift this now? It's like. Yeah. So you got time to pump yourself out of it.
It's hard to get the timing right, too.
Yeah, exactly.
And think about the direction of the bar, too. The bar's coming back towards you, so it's a more horizontal force that's being applied towards you, and you've got to take that movement and transfer it into a vertical movement. My feeling has always been like, you got to put force directly down into the ground to get a bar to come up, so I don't want anything shifting in a different direction.
You got to make a perfect L, for that to work for you.
Absolutely.
And so you got to be very precise. So good luck with that.
Yeah, and it can work. There are guys that are doing great success, and if people are willing to put in the time to learn everything, I always just try to keep things simple.
Now, what do you think about a lot of these lifters? Like I see so many that kind of go through this little pre-lifting ritual where they, I don't know, man, they're sticking their arms all out, and it's almost like they're doing sign language to people out in the crowd before they get ready to get started. And there's this huffing and puffing, and it's, to the average person, it may seem like theatrics. Like, does it really help them mentally get ready for the lift, or is it just something they've seen some other people do who quite strongly like, well, if I do it like so and so, I can do it as well. It just becomes this, I don't know, man, like a placebo effect. Like, does it really help by doing all that stuff? The stomping, the hands are out.
It may. I think you get some odd ducks that like to lift heavy things. Right. I've seen guys put their heads through walls at meets trying to get fired up for lifts, and guys that snort smelling salts and all that stuff. And maybe there's a time and a place like that for some people. But I used to do kind of like I would like put my arms out in front of me just because I felt like it kind of reminded me to get my chest up nice and tall and finish lifts, because I used to miss a lot at the top. So I think for some people the cues can matter. And individualization is obviously important in just about every athletic endeavor. But I don't think it has to be elaborate rituals. It's not like it's not something like simple like don't step on the foul line if you're a baseball player. A lot of times we have a lot more moving parts, and you're talking about a situation there where you're getting ready to lift a ton of big weights, so your head needs to be right in the right place.
Right.
I think it's either going to go or not, right? So you're either trained to lift it or you're not. You can do all the visualization stuff. You can do the foot stomps. You can scream at the crowd. But if you don't have the training in place before all of that to ensure that you have the strength to move the bar, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that no one ever really talks about is that, if you're talking about a purely powerlifting world, the deadlift is your third lift. I look back on my best meets, and I mean, invariably you feel like crap by the time deadlifting comes around. Your low back's tight. It's been a long day. You're probably hungry. You've probably had 15 grams of caffeine or something like that. You've literally just destroyed your body. And so the last thing you want to do is prancing around and doing all this stuff. Your first lift keeps you in the meet. Your second lift, you hopefully hit your total PR and maybe a specific lift PR, and then for third, you go for broke and try something that you don't have any business lifting. So, for me, simplicity is the name of the game.
I think in the gym there might be an embarrassment motivator, meaning you do this foot stomp, you do these theatrics, and now everyone in the gym is looking at you.
It's true.
The last thing you want to do is miss the lift after all of that. Like the bar doesn't budge an inch.
And the funny thing about it is, you look at some of the best lifters out there, and the guys that have been at this for a really long time, and they don't really care what's going on. I'll be joking around with people between sets, and you just kind of flip the switch and you turn on. But it doesn't matter if the stereo stops and you're between songs and you're deadlifting. You just do it anyway.
It's like Boys the Men comes on. It's like, oh no, I gotta wait for the tackle to come back. You're gonna hit that lift whether you listen to the end of the road or not, man. Just go ahead and do it.
That's right. It's like, I didn't have the right song in. That's what I missed it.
It's exactly
my vibe, man.
Start coming up with the excuses. Exactly. Now, to get more explosive off of the floor, have you found deficit deadlifts to be useful?
I'm on the fence about it. I think the issue with deadlifts from a deficit is that most people just move horribly, and you ask them to do it from a deficit, and you're asking them to take on an extra couple of inches of range of motion that can really put them in a tough situation. Particularly if you're talking about conventional deadlifts, which are already pushing the limits of somebody's mobility as it is. It's a little bit different. It's coming from a sumo pull. So I think on that end, it's probably not a great fit for a lot of lifters. That said, if you're talking about maybe pulling from a half inch to a 3/4 inch deficit, you're someone who moves particularly well. You're using it sparingly. You're cycling it in and out of your training. Yeah, there can be a place for it. So I think it really depends on the lifter and their movement quality. I can say I very rarely would use it myself. And one thing you can do is maybe if you're going to pull from a deficit, add some accommodating resistance, pull against chains, pull against bands. So maybe the load is a little bit lighter when you're at the deficit. It makes it easier to get into your position and stay true to your form. And then the load picks up as you start to stand up. So it kind of accommodates that strength curve a little bit better.
Right. Yeah, I've done some experiments with 4-inch deficit, and I found the same thing. I mean, it felt like a cool lift. It feels more like a squat than a deadlift at times. But when I went back to the conventional deadlift, I felt really out of the pocket.
Yeah.
I felt the groove was off, and I was actually weaker. I definitely wasn't stronger.
Yeah, there's a difference between the two of them. You tend to see guys drop their hips a little bit too low, and they have a hard time getting the bar around their knees, so it kind of becomes a little bit more of a squat.
Exactly.
What I'd probably rather see from people is, I love snatch grip deadlifts from without the deficit. Like if you can pull a clean lift from a snatch grip from the floor, that's a really, really good test of whether you understand the hip and torso alignment. Like really your angle should be very, very comparable, I feel like, to what your conventional deadlift is. You just challenge yourself a little bit different, a little bit heavier on the upper back. So I still use a fair amount of snatch grips. I'll rotate those in for probably 2 or 3 months out of the year and seem to do really well with them.
Yeah, I can see how those can kind of give you more of an indicator also, what you're doing wrong. Because in that snatch grip, you can really kind of see when you're pulling a little bit more with your right, like for a lot of right-handed people, I would see them pulling way more on that right side and overcompensating with that. And you see that left side dip a little bit. So I think you can really start seeing those things and correct those things before you go back to a conventional deadlift, which you probably wouldn't even notice that much.
And I'll use usually overhand on both hands and use straps on those, which I think is also a good opportunity to kind of get away from just using the alternate grip year round, where now you are putting yourself in a little bit of risk on that underhand side. So I definitely like the idea of just, it's variety. That's what our body craves. It's what we want on a daily basis. So even in the powerlifting world, I think it's important to find that.
Yeah, and I think it's smart variety, what you're talking about, where it's still the same groove that you're going to use when you do a regular deadlift, while something such as a 4-inch deficit, it's so far away that it's a completely different exercise.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have the same carryover. I've always found that whatever I'm trying to improve, it has to be precise. So if I want to improve my regular deadlift, I have to do that. If I focus on 4-inch deficit and then try to come back, I'm out of the pocket. If I even do partial deadlift, let's say the bar just below the knees, and I get really strong on those, and then I go back to the regular deadlift, well, now I'm slow off the floor.
Yeah, I think the longer I've been at this, the more and more I realize that specificity from an exercise selection standpoint really, really matters.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to be careful with that, because then you have every guy on the planet thinking they need to go on like a squat specialization program, and they run it for 3 months straight, and all of a sudden their knees hurt and they've got a herniated disc in their back. But you know, I look back on my powerlifting career, and I'm very much built to deadlift. I'm long arms, long legs, short torso, so I've always struggled a lot more with my squat, my bench, and you know, I was a big time kind of West Side disciple, you know, especially back in 2003 to 2007 when I was really active in the powerlifting scene. And you know, one of the big things they always push was, you know, good mornings. You know, if you train your good mornings hard, it's going to help your squat, it's going to help your deadlift. And you know, I got to the point where I had a better good morning than I did a squat. I was taking like mid 500 good mornings, and I was squatting like 540 in a suit, and it made no sense to me. And really, what it came down to is, you know, specificity mattered. The lifts that I was kind of predisposed to being really good at, deadlifts, they came along for the ride no matter what. I mean, I could do single leg work, I could deadlift, I could squat, I could good morning, and my deadlift was usually going to come along as long as I trained it a little bit.
Right.
If I wanted my squat to get better, I need to squat a lot. I need to squat regularly. I need to hone in my technique, and that's the stuff that brought along my squat and my bench over the course of time, is really, really training it.
Yeah. Do you find that there's more transfer of squat to deadlift and the other way around?
You know, that's a great question. I would say yes, as a good rule of thumb. Just because you see so many guys that just train the squat really, really hard, and their deadlift kind of seems to keep up. You'll see some really big time deadlifters who have what might be considered like a mediocre squat. Like, I know for me personally, like I'd always, during my powerlifting career, and I'm kind of semi-retired now, you know, I'd always lifted in equipped federations just because I trained at gyms where guys were using squat scoots and bench shirts and things like that. And, you know, in hindsight, I wish I hadn't. I get a lot more excited about raw lifting. So back in like the fall of 2012, I was feeling a little banged up one week, so I decided, hey, I'm just going to take 3 days off and just kind of recharge. And woke up one Wednesday morning feeling really good. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do a mock meet today and see how it goes. And then I came in and I squatted. I weighed in at 180 first thing in the morning, squatted 455, benched 350, and deadlifted 635. So, like, that's an elite total raw, and I did it in an hour and a half. But I think that what you look at is the numbers. Like, I pulled 635 and only squatted 455. So, you know, you can be a very successful deadlifter, and you can have a squat that's not necessarily on par with it. So I definitely think squat
I know that personally. Not that I'm the best deadlifter in the world, but I'm a way better deadlifter than I am a squatter. That's for damn sure.
The leverages are just different.
Yeah, I find similar to your body type, the deadlift comes relatively easily. It's definitely not something that I'm piling on the weight every week or month, but I just feel way more comfortable with it. While the squat is, I actually enjoy squatting, but it's a real struggle to add weight to that. It takes a lot of time.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing, too, is nobody really talks about the squat and the bench are going to be dramatically impacted by your body weight. If I put on 10 pounds, if I put on 10 pounds, my squat goes up by 50 or 60 pounds. My bench goes up 30 or 40. My deadlift stays probably exactly the same. It's completely different. And honestly, you see a lot of guys who, like, when they squat, they can bounce their belly off their thighs. Nice little rebound, like shortens range on the bar. Like, I'm jealous of those guys. One day a week, I wish I had a huge belly.
Huge belly and short arms, man. Just
stick a pillow under your shirt. Those beats.
Yeah, but I mean, I could be 230 and my deadlift probably wouldn't go up. If anything, my belly might get in the way and mess me up and make me pull sumo.
I was gonna say, I was like, if you put on too much weight, it might actually have a deleterious effect on your deadlift. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Bench press, squat, and overhead press dramatically increases with any weight increase. I remember I gained about 10 pounds and I went back to overhead kettlebell pressing, and something that was heavy for me previously was just flying overhead.
Yeah, it's just having a larger base of support underneath where your center of mass is.
I mean, which helps when you have long arms, especially on overhead pressing. It's just like, if you're a little thinner with that, it feels like it's going to take forever to get that up. So it helps.
There are some people, though, that are really impressive with the overhead pressing that are lightweight, and it's very rare. Yeah. But Ken Leisner, right, he weighed 165, and there was a clip of him years ago overhead pressing with great technique, not push press, military press, 255 for 4 reps, and none of the reps were a struggle. And it was hard to believe. Even you were watching, you're like, I can't believe he's doing it so easily.
You get what you train. Whatever guys work.
That's right.
Bruce. I remember back in like the summer of 2006, I think it was. I was just like adamant, all right, I'm gaining weight. These are going to help my powerlifting numbers. I got to get after it. And I got up to 202 at like 5'8", and man, those last 10 pounds, like they all went to my face.
I think I remember.
I looked like an Ewok that had just shaved. Like it looked
like an older guy who hangs out in one of those Boston bars.
I got up. Like this is awful.
You had a really red face, I think, if I recall correctly.
This isn't doing anything for my squat. I'm just killing my appeal to the opposite sex.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, what about for increasing explosive power, what about Olympic lifting, such as a power clean? You think that would carry over, or is it a little bit too different?
I think there's definitely a place for it. I think where it becomes challenging if you're talking about a deadlift is the first pull of an Olympic lift is dramatically different than the first pull of a deadlift.
Right.
Your initial pull from the floor in an Olympic lift is all about setting up the positioning for that second pull. You never see an elite Olympic lifter miss a lift on the first pull. Mm-hmm. He misses it on either the catch or, obviously transitioning from the clean to the jerk aspect of it. Right. So, no, the hips tend to be higher on a kind of a powerlifting style deadlift. And whereas they're a lot lower on the Olympic lifting style thing. Not only that, the Olympic lift, you're setting up, a squat catch basically. So a lot of those guys pull in shoes that have bigger heel lifts. Whereas in a deadlift, like I want to be able to drive my heels to the floor. I want to be as contacted to the ground as I can. I actually pull barefoot, just a pair of socks. More often. And I feel like if you throw me into a pair of, shoes with a pretty good heel lift, it's going to take me out of that pattern and shift me forward. And I'm not going to pull 600 with quads. I'll pull it with hamstrings and glutes, but
right.
So for me, they're totally different skills. That said, you could certainly work some high pulls, things like that in that might help you to work on your finish of each pull, things like that. But I don't see them as like a perfect transfer at all.
Yeah. What about glute-ham raises, coming back to your last point, since that's such a great posterior chain builder?
Yeah. I use them every single week.
Yeah, me too.
I probably have since 2003, and I don't know anything different, but I feel like they're also a great way to keep some size on your hamstrings and your glutes, and I think even beyond that, like it's a lot more spine friendly. Like you can only do so much squatting and deadlift, and you want to still train that posterior chain to get some carryover. And a little more functional than leg curls, things like that. And, you do some single leg stuff and throw those in, you're in a pretty good spot.
For transfer to sprinting, I found a pretty nice effect. Just being able to fly out of the gate.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about guys using them a lot in season. Guys just seem to, be at a little bit higher risk of a hamstrings issue when they're doing a lot of that stuff. But off season, absolutely. And if you're talking about, guys who are powerlifters, roll them nonstop throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about a lifting belt? Now, do you wear a belt for safety or as a performance enhancer or both?
It's a great question. I think it probably goes both places. The research certainly isn't in support of it being, wildly effective for creating safety. And, Stuart McGill's published some stuff about that. I think certainly, every power lifter lifts it because we can get more loading out of it. What I can tell you is when I do a high volume program, and I may do a lot of volume, of deadlifting or squatting, like your back is eventually going to be a little bit of a limiting factor for you. So, like I had a recent program that was something like 8 sets of 3 at like 76% after, doing a high volume of work on my first exercise of the day. And I put it on for the last 3 or 4 sets, even though it was only 76%, just because my back was starting to get a little cranky and I wanted to kind of get through the session, get my volume in and not risk it. So I think there's a place for both. I know it kind of is probably more anecdotal observation than what the research certainly supports. But, I think you also have to look at is like the, I remember Mike Boyle talking about it from a liability standpoint. You never want to be that guy that tells a client, don't put a belt on, because what happens if they don't put it on and they get hurt and they say, the belt would have helped me. So, if you're someone that's demanding to use a belt, they can use it. But for the average lifter, they probably don't need it. Especially
I see guys at the gym, they're about to do 225 on the deadlift, and they're getting their training partner to make the belt as tight as possible. Like, guys, you're not ready for that yet, man. Relax.
You'll see guys on like the pec deck using their weight belts. You really don't need it for that stuff. That's where it becomes a crutch. That's just they're being lazy and they don't want to take it off. So I mean, when I pull, honestly, like on my warm ups, I'm not touching a belt until I get to like 545.
Okay.
Everything underneath that is, and then it's for me, it's just like, all right, I just want to make sure I groove this before I start getting to the big boy weights.
Have you tried maxing out or close to it without a belt?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've pulled over 6, multiple times without a belt and not really had a problem with it. But, I mean, I don't know what I actually get out from my belt. I like training without a belt as a little bit of almost like a training implementation, meaning that you train beltless for a while and you go back to using a belt, you feel like you really get a lot out of it. Similar to like, if you pull with a really, really stiff bar and then you go back to a little bit more of a deadlifting bar that has a little more whip to it, maybe better knurling, you'll see stuff like that can really make a big difference. So, yeah, getting away from a belt for a while. Greg Robbins is one of my staff members who does that a lot and with great outcomes. So I think there's definitely a place for it.
Yeah, because it can become a crutch if you use it 100% of the time.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is like, I mean, it depends on how much you travel and stuff, but like if you're going across the country to do something, the last thing you want to do is have to bring a crap load of lifting gear with you. So
right.
Yeah, I don't think you should become reliant on a belt at all.
Now you use a close stance and close grip, placement of your hands. I use a very similar style to what you use. Yeah. What about sumo? Have you ever experimented with that?
Yeah, it's funny. I was never a really big sumo puller aside from just like rotating it in. And just one training cycle, I kind of incorporated it as a little bit more of a main effort. And my sumo came along really, really fast. I actually pulled like I think 615 or 620 sumo. So it came around really well. And I think probably the secret for me, I don't pull ultra wide. I tend to put kind of like some people will call it like a duck stance or something like that. But I'm probably maybe 1.5 times hip width, where you see other guys that are really out there at like 2.5 times their hip width. So I don't get ultra wide, but I feel like that also maybe gives me a little bit better carryover in my squat when I'm not too wide.
Yeah. I used to use a wider stand, not too wide, but a little bit wider than what I use now, and then I grip the bar a little bit wider. And I think a mutual friend of ours, Jack Reed, he saw a clip of me on mine, and he recommended I take a stance more like yours. And initially it was uncomfortable, but after a couple of weeks, I was lifting more than ever, and I still use it now. So it really makes a big difference finding that optimal groove for your body type. Yeah,
there are a lot of people that pull really, really wide, and I mean, I don't have any like research to support this other than what I've heard. It's very aggressive on your hips, especially if you have guys who are competing and using like, a box squat mentality. If you're box squatting and you're pulling sumo, your hips are not going to be very happy with you on a pretty regular basis. So, I think you just need to save your bullets a little bit on the sumo and use them here and there, but not make it a nonstop throughout the year unless that's your really competitive lift.
Yeah. Right. Made me think of a funny story about, Ellen Stein, right? She's a powerlifter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool lady. Yeah, she's a really cool lady. She's a funny lady, good sense of humor. But she used to come to a lot of my courses, and I was telling her to take a closer stance on double swings, and that worked out. And then she was talking about deadlifting, and I was like, try keeping your legs closer together more often. She's like, oh, what are you trying to say? I spread my legs too often? I was like, yeah, that's what I've heard, Ellen. There's some rumors out there. But it's funny because I wouldn't make a joke like that to her, even though I know her really well, because obviously you don't want to offend somebody at your course, but the fact that she responded immediately with that is what cracked me up. I was like, you're a fun person to work with, man.
She's feisty. I've had a chance to work with her a little bit back in the day, too. She's a fun one.
Yeah, she's really strong, too.
Yeah,
I think she's probably she's definitely past her 50s when she was competing a lot. I'm not sure what she's doing now, but she was really strong.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about the squat a little bit, because do you use a powerlifting squat style, meaning where you try to sit back into a chair behind you?
Not as much as I used to. I think that was something that really was born out of like guys using squat suits.
Right.
Certainly back when I was competing in those, and I was honestly never a good equipped lifter. Like I was terrible. I hated getting my squats. That was a pain in the butt. And I never felt like I went to a meet and was like really displayed my strength because I was never good enough in my squat suits. As I shifted to more of a raw setup, it definitely became a little bit less back, and squat down instead of just back. So that for me was definitely a change that came about as I got to a more raw lifting setup. Raw lifters just have to use a little bit more quads, so that torso might be a little bit more upright. I still turn most of my heaviest squats into good mornings just because of the way I'm built. But but yeah, I have gotten away from being just super back. No,
I find I go straight down, and then as I get closer to that parallel point, then I start shifting back a little bit more, as opposed to pushing the glutes out as far as possible to initiate the motion.
Yeah, and usually when you're pushing back like that, really what you're doing is you're hyperextending your lumbar spine. What you're effectively doing is you're giving up your core control because you're closing things down in the back and then you're flaring up in the front. And what happens when you flare up in the front? You take the erectus abdominis and you just lengthen it. It's not really in a good position to give you core control to support that load. So it's as the answer with everything. It's don't go too far in any direction.
Right. So what's your opinion on the high bar versus the low bar on the squats here?
Put it this way, I'm wired for a low bar setup.
Same here.
I've been doing it so long that going to a high bar just doesn't feel right. So there are guys that do great with it, but I don't think you're ever going to see a lot of really, really, really strong guys who are squatting with a high bar setup, unless they have fantastic mobility to really get their hands in close and all that. So I think most of the strongest people I see tend to be wider grip, lower bar setups.
How low do you go? Because I've seen people who it looks like they have the bar in the middle of their back.
Yeah. I'm not that low by any means. I to be honest, I probably even forget what high bar actually feels like because I haven't really done it for so long. But no, I think the lower you go, the more you're putting your shoulders in a really, really tough spot, and you're actually giving up that shelf that you need to create. So it's about finding that happy medium for sure between the two.
Yeah, I find just below the traps.
Yeah.
Yep.
It feels perfect. And then actually it allows me to stay a little bit more upright in the descent.
Yeah, I feel more like I'm at no longer a low bar, more like a mid bar, if anything.
Right.
Because otherwise, it seems like the lower you go, the more you end up becoming like, a stripper coming back up. You got to sit there and just come up super high ass first, so you just like head down, ass up the whole time, feel like a loop dancer. So
it's funny. I can't even describe where I hold the bar. I could actually show you. I use the giant camber bar a lot. Just because it's more shoulder friendly, and I've got kind of a history of some shoulder stuff that doesn't really love back squatting. The giant camber bar, like the knurling, is just unforgiving. Like it destroys your upper back. So I have like a permanent scab on both sides of my upper back where I can be like, all right, this is where I hold the bar.
That's a good question with the shoulders. Do you do rotator cuff exercises, shoulder stability drills?
Yeah, I have to, because beyond just what I do on the lifting side of things, I've got a gruesome MRI. I've got a 15 millimeter retracted rotator cuff tear. I've got a slap tear. I've got a cartilage defect in my humeral head, but kind of the whole 9 yards. And I'm definitely I was supposed to have surgery in 2003, and I've been kicking the can down the road. But on top of that, I'm really involved in the baseball population. So I'm literally on a weekly basis actually playing a lot of catch, long tossing, you name it, catching bullpens. So I need to stay on top of doing a lot of cuff stuff. For me, that's non-negotiable. Really, the only thing I can't do is back squat really heavy. That's the stuff that flares my shoulder up like crazy. That really externally rotated position, significant load on it. One of the things I have been trying a little bit more is using the Duffalo bar, Chris Duffin's bar that from Kabuki Strength, and playing around with that a little bit more. I need to kind of have like a wide setup, and so far so good. I haven't really pushed it like crazy. I took it up to like 375 for a few reps on Sunday just to see how it felt, but that's still a little bit of a work in progress because I really miss back squatting. I enjoy it a lot.
Right.
But I use the safety squat bar, the giant camber bar, front squat, stuff like that a lot more now just because it's not worth risking it with me, basically being retired from powerlifting.
Right. Yeah. The safety squat bar is cool. It feels awkward, at least the first couple times you use it. You feel like it's going to flip right off your back.
There's definitely an adjustment period. It gets a ton of use at our facility with our pro baseball guys. And I'm a huge fan of it. We do a lot of stuff beyond just squatting with it. Like we'll do single leg work with it, split squats, forward and reverse lunges, using the slide board, using a non-slide board, all kinds of stuff. So very, very good way to I think it's like the whole concept of adding variety, but not necessarily changing things. You can do a lot of great stuff if you have a few different specialty bars under your roof.
Absolutely. How did this whole path into baseball strength training happen for you?
It was honestly almost completely by accident. I did my grad degree at the University of Connecticut from 2003 to 2005. And while I was there, I actually worked mostly with basketball and soccer. And I always thought that, the route I would wind up going was working in college basketball, strength and conditioning. And it just so happened that, when I finished up, I wound up going to the private sector, kind of wanting to work in that realm a little bit before I did anything else. And, when I first started working in the private sector, some of the first guys I started working with were baseball players. And by that time I had already had a bunch of shoulder issues myself. And, I realized that it was, a population I could kind of relate to because of those shoulder issues. And it was something I was passionate learning about. But at the same time, I realized that it was a very underserved population. Either they were the guys that got handed the football program or they got handed the rehab program. And, they didn't ever get anything in the middle that, kind of took into account the unique needs of their sport and, the functional demands of baseball. But at the same time, realized that, hey, we can push these guys hard if we make sure our exercise selection is appropriate and we're challenged at the right times of year. So it became a little niche for us, and some of those high school guys became college guys became pro guys had teammates and agents and organizations that led to referrals and stuff. So here we are basically 10 plus years later, and we train guys from all 30 major league organizations, and it's really blown up. And really what it comes down to, I always tell people, if you want to build a successful business, just solve a problem.
Right.
And we found a problem, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
I always say if you want to make a lot of money, just make a product or service that feeds on people's laziness.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I tell you can't go to Whole Foods without seeing the parking sharks in the first several spots waiting forever so they don't have to walk an extra 10 feet into what's supposedly a health food supermarket.
Yeah, absolute truth. That's the nature of it. And it, it's frustrating because when you see those guys that are based on just being lazy, it's leaving a lot of athletes out in the cold. That frustrates me a lot, is that, we have a lot of guys who are like, yeah, I'm a baseball specific strength coach. So what do? They change barbell bench press to dumbbell bench press and think they're done. It's the honest to God truth. And there's a whole lot more to it. And we're talking like billions of dollars wasted on arm injuries in professional, collegiate, and high school baseball. And, we've really worked hard to try to change that. But I feel for the guys that don't get the care that they deserve, because they really want to do right and they want to work hard, but they just need the direction.
Yeah, you think about how many quote-unquote strength training programs for baseball actually caused injuries, as opposed to being preventive, which is what a good strength and conditioning program should be.
That's what it's about, and that's where you have to temper expectations sometimes. Sometimes guys are just so dead set on getting strong, and you have to realize, hey, let's take a step back. We'll do that, but you got to do this as well to make sure that you can make use of that strength in the right context. So it's about finding a middle ground, as with everything in the fitness world.
Well, what did you find were some of the problems with strength and conditioning for baseball when you first entered into this domain?
I think you had two scenarios. One, there was literally no level of individualization. It was just squat, bench, clean, and keep your fingers crossed and hope things work out well. But I think we also had a scenario of guys being excessively pampered, and that's just as much of a problem as here's your band program, do some wrist curls, we'll take care of your shoulder and elbow with that. What you don't realize is that, hey, the rest of your body, if it moves the way that it should, can take a lot of stress off your arm as well. So I think we really learned how to figure out a balance between those two things. Is that, hey, you can borrow from the rehab worlds, you can borrow from the high performance world, and create a philosophy that's somewhere in the middle that caters to guys' individual needs. So above all else, we were very, very big on individualization. You'll see crazy stuff in baseball players. You'll see stuff that's totally abnormal in the context of the general population. You'll see stuff that you just don't see anywhere else. So that's why it's been something that's really good for us, and in an environment where individualization is something we prioritize so heavily. I feel like you have a lot of athletes that, when they come in here, they feel like someone's listening to them and, treating them as an individual for their first time in their career.
Yeah, I think specificity, you hit the nail on the head. And you're finding that with some of the newer sports, such as MMA, they've had similar problems there where they've taken traditional models and just applied it there in a generic fashion. And it's either counterproductive or not useful at all. And then sometimes people just have a big decline in performance.
Yeah.
And there's one strength coach, Nick Curzon, who has some really innovative methods, and he worked with the Marinovich brothers. Mm-hmm. So he's really focused on creating speed that matches the sport. And he worked with Rafael dos Anjos, who up until this bad loss recently was the champion. But he always wanted to make this guy move faster and be the first one to do anything, first one to throw a punch, first one to take down his opponent. And it worked really well when he did win the championship. But he said that with a lot of people, they're doing too much weight training without the mobility, without the explosive work, and is making them tighter so that they're not stronger in the ways they need to be in the actual sport.
Yeah, you've got to be able to use what you train. And I think that's a big thing. I think, at the end of the day, it really comes down to if you look at any program, right, if one of the three of us writes a program, we should be able to take a casual observer to exercise physiology. We should be able to literally explain to them exactly why everything that we put in that program is there, right? Mm-hmm. Why is there this exercise? Oh, it's because it's going to work on thoracic mobility, and that's important for pitchers. And why is this one? Oh, it's working on single leg strength, and that's something that you really need to pitch at a high level. And I think what you find is that there are a lot of people that literally can't do that. Instead, they say, well, this is what we've always done. Well, why are you running your pitchers into the ground? Is that functionally improving their performance in any way possible? And the answer is no. But the point is, nobody's in many cases asked that hard question. It's kind of like watching these MMA fighters, training with altitude masks and things like that.
Right.
We know it's brutal, it's ineffective, it's a waste of money, and all it is it's for show. But nobody has challenged them to basically justify why they're including it. And I think that's what we have
I
to
think sometimes we make the mistake of doing stuff because visually we like the way it looks visually. Right?
It makes
so
it look
when
like,
the UFC camera crew comes over to the gym, like, hey, can you put that mask on? It'll look good for this behind the scenes episode.
Are you trained to be suffocated by the mob? Like they're gonna throw a bag over your head or something like that? What are you training for?
It's the absolute truth. And I mean, that stuff frustrates me. But even in baseball, we have agents that, that refer people to us and represent some of our guys who are incredibly well-intentioned and great people. And they'll send care packages to their players. And, they might include some bands and some, compressive arm sleeves and some trail mix for road trips and things like that. And then they throw an altitude mask in there. I'm like, good Lord, just keep that out. And you're going to save this kid hundreds of dollars worth of manual therapy on his scalenes and, the other accessory muscles of inhalation that are going to get overworked because he's wearing it. So,
is that the big problem with the mask? You're overworking things.
I think that's part of it. I mean, first off, I think we realize that the metabolic benefits probably aren't as great as people believe. When you go to altitude, you're not fundamentally resisting inhalation. What you're doing is you're creating adaptations at the level of the lungs that physiologically are allowing you to make better use of oxygen. Right. Whereas when you have an altitude mask, all you're doing is you're resisting inflow of air. So you're effectively overtraining muscles like scalenes, pec minor, lat, subclavius, these muscles of inhalation that are already overworked and incredibly hypertonic in the classic postural adaptation. So I'd argue that you're making posture worse by throwing people into one of those masks. So, I mean, that's a crazy rant. It's obviously theoretical, but it's just I don't see any rationale for it. You're decreasing work volume too. You're not getting as much quality work, and you're not getting the metabolic benefits according to research. So it's just maybe not worth it.
I think sometimes people tinker too much with stuff, right? It's you have to do a certain amount of tinkering to improve. But if you take that needle a little bit too far, now it starts taking away from the overall paradigm.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
You get distracted in complexity.
And you know what? And I think tinkering is one thing. I think overhauling is another. We've all had that buddy who goes to a new seminar and they come back and Monday morning, literally they've thrown 75% of their philosophy out. They go from being a Olympic lifting guy to a high intensity machine based training guy. My feeling is if I go to an event like that, I want to pick up a couple exercises. If an event overhauls my philosophy by 1%, that's a tinker, and I'm thrilled.
Right.
That's been a great return on investment. But very rarely do you have that. I went to the Posture Restoration Institute events. Those ones, shifted probably 2 to 3% of our population, or our philosophy, I should say, and that was probably the best investment I could have possibly made. It was a game changer for us. But the longer you've been in this industry, the more you realize you do a subtle tinker when you pick up new things, but you never overhaul.
Right.
Yeah. If you have a complete overhaul, then obviously, whatever you were rolling with before was obviously very much flawed.
Yeah. I'm always looking. I don't mind complexity if it improves the basic moves, right? So I like looking at things that are going to improve what I like to do. But when someone says you need to replace all of those things, because I'm doing the basic movements that we all know work. So you don't need to overhaul that stuff. Just give me some ideas or some moves, some techniques that are going to improve these things.
Absolutely. You—that's the name of the game.
Now, balance training is the other thing you've been very vocal about. I remember years ago you either wrote an article or it was a very well-written post, I forget which, where you really broke down a lot of the flaws with the supposed benefits of balance training.
Yeah.
And I think one of the salient points you made is that, look, if you get good at tightrope walking, that's not going to improve your surfing technique and vice versa. So balance training is very specific. So if you do power cleans on an Indo board, that's not going to make you better at power cleans off the board.
Yeah. So really what it originated with is my master's thesis at the University of Connecticut. We ran basically from 2004 to 2005. It was published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research in 2007. And we were looking at unstable surface training. Does it have merits for performance? So to give you a little background, I mean, back in the 60s, we had research that showed that balance, and it's important to recognize balance is a proficiency. It's something you're good at or bad at. You have different levels of good, but it's very skill specific, right? So if you have great balance in single leg stance on a flat surface, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have phenomenal balance in two-legged stance on an unstable surface.
Right.
It's very skill specific. People use balance and stability interchangeably. They're actually different. Stability is a state. So, if I go from two legs to one leg, I become less stable because I've made my base of support smaller. If I lean to the side, I'm more unstable because my center of mass is outside my base of support. So what we do is we manipulate stability in our training programs in order to train balance. So what we asked when we did our master's thesis was, if we put somebody on an unstable surface, whether it's a Bosu ball or a Dynadisc or a wobble board, do we get training benefits that carry over to stable surface performance, in terms of people who have no clinical condition? And that's a very important differentiation to make because there is research that shows that unstable surface training can be really, really valuable for people who have had a previous ankle sprain and develop something called functional ankle instability. Mm-hmm. So after you roll your ankle in a lateral ankle sprain, your peroneals, the muscles on the outside of your lower leg, there's a proprioceptive delay. They just don't kick on as fast as they should, and you're more likely to re-sprain that ankle. So certainly there's a place for doing unstable surface training or a rehab process and all that. But what's happened is, in light of those outcomes and, people with a vested financial interest in the success of these products, all of a sudden we've heard people saying, hey, get on that Bosu ball, do your squats, it'll make you faster, you jump higher, do all this stuff. So we wanted to investigate whether there was in fact a carryover. So believe it or not, our study subjects were the University of Connecticut men's soccer team. It was the number one team in the country at that time, and we did a training intervention with them during their spring season. And what we actually found was that basically using unstable surface training for as little as 2 to 3% of their overall training volume actually attenuated improvements in sprinting speed, jump height, things along those lines. So it basically helped to sap power. So that's a really significant thing because the spring season in soccer is the time when you get strong, you get fast, and then you condition in the summer to be ready for the fall to actually play soccer matches. So we expected to see across the board improvements, in athletes, in terms of running fast, jumping high, all that stuff. And we certainly did see that. But what we found were that the people who did zero unstable surface training interventions actually got faster and jumped higher on 3 of the 4 measures. And it was a statistically significant difference than people who included even just it was one exercise 3 days a week. So what we kind of, we had a bunch of theories postulating why, this happens. Everything from kind of creating a little bit more of a tentative athlete to maybe increasing antagonist co-contraction during, forceful movements, which is something that you don't really want from a peak power development standpoint. So there were a lot of things that could have justified it. But what we basically said is you got to be really careful if you're using this with healthy people without a history of ankle sprain, especially if you're using them in substantial volume. So, what I tell you is even if you're a surfer or a skier or anything like that, if you're spending, the overwhelming majority of your time on unstable surface training, you're probably making a really big mistake with your training. If you're going to include them in really small doses and only with the right people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're already spending a lot of time in an unstable surface environment, such as a surfer, snowboarder, etc., you don't need to spend more time in your strength and conditioning program. That should be to maybe balance out some of the imbalances you're creating through your sport.
Yeah. So that was published in the JSCR. I mean, it was like over 90 pages when all was said and done. It was a crazy lit review. And I was spoiled. I had some of the best sports scientists around. Dr. William Kramer was on the paper. Dr. Dave Tiberio was a phenomenal physical therapist, was on my committee. Carl Marish was my advisor at the University of Connecticut. Chris West, who was associate head of strength and conditioning at UConn. Like I was very spoiled to have brilliant people around me. And, I look back on it, we were kind of the first people ever to look at how a chronic, it was a 10-week training intervention in healthy athletes impacts performance. And since then, there have actually been a couple studies that have come out that have replicated our results and substantiated it. So, you just got to be really careful when you put somebody into a program. Like I said, you got to be able to justify why it's in there. And if the research doesn't support it and the anecdotal observations don't support it, it probably doesn't belong there.
I think one of the problems is when a trainer or coach is motivated by marketing more than looking at the best path for improving performance. And what I mean by that is they're doing something that looks different than someone else as a way to separate themselves from the herd, even though it may not be useful or effective.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's funny. Like I don't have a gadget. You know what I mean? I look out there. I'm like, maybe I should have a gadget. I don't know. But like I can't sell barbells. Right. I'm like, bands. We do a lot of rotator cuff stuff or manual resistance exercise, which require no equipment. Like we're not trying to sell guys on anything other than results. So I think that level of separation from any financial gain with a lot of this stuff. I think it helps to lend some credibility to what you do, and you use that to get better results.
Yeah, so I remember I was talking to a bunch of trainers in the UK, and I was talking to my friend Christian, and he said that a lot of trainers out here are not looking for more information. They're looking for ways to make more money. So it's the courses that are marketing information courses are going to be more appealing. And some part of a marketing course can be add this product that no one is using in your area so that you become the expert in that. And that's all fine and good if that's something useful. Wow. Yeah. But if it isn't, then you're doing your clients a disservice.
Yeah, my feeling is if you want to separate yourself in any industry, there's only two ways. It's either price or offering, and price is a crappy way to go. I mean, you're going to be one of 8 CrossFits in one town, or you're going to be mom and pop drugstore trying to compete with Walmart.
Right.
So you have to compete on your offering, and what I can tell you is that novelty is an important part of offering. Like it's something that is really, really important to have because people get bored very easily in all aspects of their life. Novelty with a training implement gets old fast because it's hard to keep coming up with new implements. But if you can create novelty with an experience where every time somebody shows up, they feel like they're still part of that family, there's something new happening. There's, things that make them excited about keep coming back to the gym. There's new PRs, things like that. That's the kind of novelty that keeps people around long term and builds successful businesses. Nobody ever you could come out with a brand new version of the kettlebell every week if you want to, Mike. And that's not why people are going to like you. They're going to like you because you deliver high quality information, you deliver fantastic coaching, you deliver it with a personality that gets them engaged and makes them excited to train. And then you probably have people that you could do a seminar in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, and they're going to travel to it because they know that you're going to deliver experience that makes them feel different than anybody else can. And you don't get that with, hey, we have a new kettlebell. Like that's not what it's about.
Right, or some kind of new equipment that will supposedly improve performance, but now it actually, once you get used to using that equipment, you go back to not using it. It actually takes away from your performance, and now it ruins that.
Yeah, it takes away from performance, but it adds the clutter in your house, and it takes away from your relationship because your wife is looking like, what is all this crap, man, that you don't use.
And it's funny, like I could probably count on one hand the number of people I know in the industry who have really come up with like that game-changing piece of equipment that has sustained for such an extended period of time, but there are also people that run like good like brick and mortar gym type operations. Like I don't know, maybe like Louis Simmons with like the reverse hyper and having West 5, but there aren't people that really have done that over an extended period of time. I'd have to probably actually like Randy Hetrick with TRX. TRX was a game changer, but Randy's not running a gym. He's selling a product that makes gyms better and helps people improve their offering. So, I don't know all the answers, man, but I think it comes down to making people feel special, and equipment doesn't do that. Experiences do.
Yeah.
Well, I think
that's what people do. They buy experiences, and that's the thing. That's where they really come. They're buying. I think a lot of these coaches forget that most of the time people are buying into them. They can care less about what you have. They can care less about how many certifications you have. A lot of times they don't even ask. They don't even care if you have one. Like, dude, what can you do for me? I talked to my friend. They said this about you. I want to see for myself. Because I see how she's raving about you, or how he raves about you. And they want some of that. They don't want to feel like they're getting left out, that they're stuck with just the bum at some big box gym. It's like, well, if you're doing all this, I want to do that. I want to feel that way. I want to talk. I want to actually join the discussion when you bring up this guy, instead of just saying like, oh, for real? They actually want to be like, yeah, she's telling the truth. I train with this guy too. People want to be a part of the conversation, not just necessarily be the audience listening to the conversation.
There was a really good discussion this weekend. I spoke at the Perform Better Providence Summit. It was my 10th year on the Perform Better tour, and I was the youngest presenter in the history of the tour. So I've been really spoiled to be around some really, really good coaches for an extended period of time. And at the end of Saturday, at every one of these events, they do a Q&A. And there was somebody in the audience that said, what recommendation would you give to those of us in the audience who someday want to be up there presenting on the panel? And, there were the classic responses like, oh, be passionate. Everybody's passionate in my eyes.
Right.
But and Mike Boyle raised his hand and he said, how about be so good at something that people want to listen to you? I'm like, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I mean, it's incredibly blunt, but I think there are a whole lot of people out there that are just very vanilla.
I think the problem is when someone has that goal of being on the panel, right? It's like someone who it's like an actor is like, oh, I want to win an Academy Award.
Yeah.
And they've never done a movie yet.
Yeah.
So it's like get really, like Matt Damon says, like, look, get really good at your craft. It's like you don't want to pick roles and act a certain way because you think this is going to get you in the eyes of the Academy and you may win an award. So you get exceptional at your craft and you'll be on that panel and a lot of other panels if you so want. But when they're thinking already, how do I get on that panel? And they're a brand new coach. It's like that's the wrong focus to have. It's like someone who just started in the business going, okay, I want to make 6 figures this year. So you should be happy if you're still in business by the end of this year. It's like don't worry about the money right now. Focus on building a great brand and being an excellent coach. The money will come. It's like what you said, Eric. If you want to separate yourself from the herd, produce great results. Yeah. Because not a lot of people do that.
It's the truth. My business partner has given some good presentations on it. And he actually did a talk called Business Before Branding. Like, don't try to build a personal brand until you've shown that you can pay your mortgage by doing this. Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Like, you have so many people that are so caught up in making sure that they have the right website name and that, they're getting plenty of Instagram followers and all this stuff. I'm like, man, if you can't name the 4 muscles of the rotator cuff, you probably shouldn't be training professional baseball players. Like, it's the honest to God truth. But I think, we definitely do have a little bit of an industry trend of trying to like ascend a little bit too quickly. And, I'm probably guilty of it too. I look back to what I was doing in my early 20s and I was building a brand. I was probably one of the first to market with respect to being a young guy on the internet that, that kind of advanced at a young age. And I look at it now and it's a different game. It's a very saturated market. It's a lot harder to do. And I think that just underscores the importance of you got to be able to differentiate yourself with your results and how you make people feel.
Yeah, because who gets bored with making results? With getting training results, right? Like whenever people talk about like, oh, I'm tired of using this program, it's like, no, you're tired of not getting results. Right. If you were setting PRs every week, or your weights were moving up every time you walked in the gym, or you're doing more reps, or you're looking better in the mirror, you're not going to be fed up of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think even beyond that, like results are results, but like you have to remember, like, so I have guys that throw 100 miles an hour. Like they're probably 100 to 120 of them on the planet. And we have, probably 6 or 8 of them that train with us. We have a guy who's playing in Japan who's throwing in excess of 100 miles an hour, like regularly throughout his career. It's like an insane thing to do. And so with those guys, you can't very well say, hey, listen, I'm going to get you to 107. Like it doesn't happen.
That's true.
It's limited. If you're already that elite on an insane schedule, the increments are smaller. Like it's like being an 800-pound deadlifter. You might have to fight for 16 weeks to pull 810. Like that's a lot of work to get to that point. So I think what you have to do is you have to do 2 things. One, you have to figure out, are there shifts in priorities that you identify that other people don't see? Is, hey, here's something I saw on your evaluation that's going to allow you to be able to sustain that velocity and be healthy over an extended period of time so that you can leverage that 100-mile-an-hour fastball to make more money and support your family. But I think even beyond that, is there something that we can do in our training offer to engage you, to make sure that you still want to take care of your body, that it's not getting boring because for whatever reason this came too easy for you. So there are times to kind of tread water from a results standpoint, but do so in a way that keeps people motivated about the actual training process.
Yeah. I think progress needs to be defined in a different way too, because like, let's say I hit a PR of 550 on the deadlift, and then 5 years later, I can still do that PR safely. Some would say, oh, you haven't made any progress, but you've gotten 5 years older and you're still able to do something safely and you haven't been injured. That's also a form of success in making progress.
I agree with you 100%. And I think there's something to be said about sustaining performance, over an extended period of time. I'm the dad of 19-month-old twin daughters.
Yeah.
When our girls were born, I dropped 10 pounds in the first 6 months, came off me pretty quickly. And, I've still really worked hard to sustain that. And to me, being able to do at 35 what I did at 30 is a dramatic difference with all the stress life's thrown at us. But I also see that in the professional ranks. One of the things that we talk a lot with our baseball guys around is, and I don't know if this number has ever been published, but this is more of an anecdotal conversation I had with a guy who worked within an organization who did some of the studies. He said that your chances of making it to the big leagues in baseball were 50% as high if you got a surgery in the minor league. So if you had an elbow surgery, cut your chances of getting to the big leagues in half. Wow. That's a huge deal. So if we can keep a guy performing at a high level, keep him healthy for 5 years, he might be able to just sustain it and make it to the big leagues at 27, 28, 29 when he thought that dream was over. So being healthy and putting yourself in a position to thrive is really, really important.
Yeah, that's a really important focus, because imagine someone who's a great high school football player who gets a terrible injury, and then that impedes him getting a scholarship, and then maybe he would have gone on to the NFL after that. And it all started from training that was counterproductive early in his path in this whole way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. We don't want to keep you on all day. You've been just a ton of great information. Well, where can people find out more about everything you're doing?
Probably two places. The first, my website is ericcressey.com, ERICCRESSEY.com. And then our facilities, we have a gym in both Hudson, Massachusetts, and in Jupiter, Florida. That's CressySportsPerformance.com.
And is there anything that you've been researching recently that you're excited about?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Right in my wheelhouse right now, we're seeing a ton of thoracic outlet syndrome cases in Major League Baseball right now. Some pretty big names that have happened in the last couple of weeks have gone in for surgery for. And that's kind of like a niche that we've done really, really well with and help guys manage that conservatively and help them after the surgeries and things like that. So probably not necessarily wildly applicable to a lot of our readers, but that's what I'm geeking out right now. And, something that you're going to see certainly moving forward.
Yeah, one great thing about the age we're in right now is just the prolific dissemination of information. It's like there's a lot of crappy information, right? And people tend to focus on that and complain about it, but there's also a lot of great information in all arenas, breakthroughs happening left and right, that if you're not keeping up to date with it, as someone who's in this industry, you're going to be just pushed to the wayside quickly.
Absolutely. They're inventing new surgeries. We're learning more about nutritional impacts and all this different stuff. So if you're not staying on top of the latest stuff, you're definitely falling behind really fast.
Yeah, stem cells is something that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Where now you have elbow injuries where you can inject your own stem cells in there, and it heals injuries that you may have had for years.
Yeah, that's kind of like a big frontier in baseball. Now there is still kind of like mixed results on it, but it could be one of those things where they refine things and be a game changer for a lot of guys to avoid surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey man, thanks a lot again. Great talking to you. Awesome information.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, great pleasure. We'll have this episode out later this week, and I'll send over you a link.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thanks a lot, Eric. Take care.
All right.
And that's Eric Cresey. One thing we do consistently is we bring the best people on the show. Charles Poliquin, Eric Cresey, Christian Thibodeau. I mean, there's so many. We have basically a free database on both of our websites and iTunes to some extent of the best people in the business.
It's like a who's who. It's like, dude, there are people that are selling like DVDs with all these, these experts of this caliber, or they have these seminars where they put all them together and it costs thousands of dollars. And here we are. We're bringing them here on the show for you.
Right.
Actually, it's probably a little bit more. You get a little bit more for the fact that instead of going to one of these seminars where you have all these heavy hitters going on where they may have just a limited amount of time, these guys come on the show and pretty much we just let them have at it. And, hey, man, if they want to take 2 hours, to discuss things, so be it. It's not sitting there like, oh, it's like a TED Talk. You got 18 minutes. Here's your
and then you as the listener can listen to it whenever you want. You can listen to it at your own pace. I mean, there's a lot of shows I listen to where I'll listen maybe to 10, 15 minutes at a time because there's so much information that I was like, okay, I need to listen to this when I'm in a place where I can sit down and write some stuff down.
If I'm driving, I'm listening, I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to write this down. Or, okay, I'm about to get out of the car. Okay, I'm going to have to come back and listen again because maybe some jackass just cut me off and interrupted a very good part of that podcast I was listening to. Like, damn, So, yeah, man, that's the beauty of this technology that we have now.
And one thing I've implemented that's been great is I've just wanted to add more activity to my day. So I'm doing these 2-mile walks every day, no matter what. If I'm training that day, I still do the 2-mile walks if I'm not training. Now, when the weather's better and my dogs go with me, right now it's way too hot. So for me, I just walk out there in the heat. Now, some will say it's way too hot. I go, look, man, that's a positive thing because that heat is good for your muscles, right?
It's good for your muscles and it's also good for, your mental toughness as well.
Yeah, like exactly.
Especially in the field I'm in now, it's like, okay, if you can't just sit there and walk when it's like 90 degrees with a heat index of 110, how can you handle other stresses in your life? If you just can't even do like 20 minutes of that, what's going to really push you to like try to really push and add another 10 pounds to your deadlift in the gym with air conditioning? So
I mean, there's a lot of hills. There's a lot of hills out here. It's blue skies. It's sunny. So that's all good. It's really hot. So that's definitely something that's basically a form of resistance you're working against, which I don't mind. But the heat actually feels great on the body. I mean, I tell you what, after you do heavy deadlifts or heavy squats, instead of just coming home and taking a nap, come home and immediately go do that walk. You're going to loosen up.
And that's what I usually do now because now we have another rescue. So we're walking twice as long now because when we got him, he wasn't in shape. Now we have an English bulldog. And, of course I read up on him. There's always these health issues or whatever else. But, as I was reading that stuff, I said, yes, probably because they have unhealthy owners. So just in a matter of like a week or two, we saw his health turn around just for the fact that he's actually getting out every night. It's hot here in Houston as well. But so we walk at night. We walk late at night, like about 11 o'clock at night, around our community. And we do about 2 miles as well, just going round and round. And of course, he can't do the entire 2 miles right off the bat. But just within a week or two, he went from where we just made one round around the community where he sounded like a straight up asthma attack victim after that first night, man, just going just one lap around to now to the point where he's actually trying to outrun my Basenji, trying to get ahead of him, who's got the longer legs or whatever. So now the brothers are competing with each other, like who can get around the fastest. So, again, and it's helping us, because now there's really no excuse. And it helps me because I'm coming straight from the gym. I come home, refuel a little bit, and then I'm ready. That's actually active recovery for me. Do that as well. And
it's one of those things you can't overtrain. So I always tell people, start walking every day, no matter what. None of this 5 days on, 2 days off. You don't need rest days. Like every day, walk.
We're walking, so why do you need to have a rest day for walking? Like,
and I don't consider this. And I don't consider this a workout either. Like for me, walking is like a separate category. Yeah, it's a separate category to me than working out. Like I don't put this in my training journal. I walk 2 miles today. For me, it's like walking is transportation. That's how you get from one point to another, and you should be able to do that without having to train for it, right?
Exactly.
But like you said, it's very good mentally. Also, I like to listen to music, so why not walk and listen to music? So I'm getting some activity instead of sitting around and listening to music. Or I like to listen to podcasts, so why not walk and listen to a show instead of again sitting around being inactive listening to a show?
Exactly. So yeah, man. Like I said, it is great therapy at that time. So yeah, man, you get to unwind. So if that workout kicked your ass, instead of sitting there feeling just defeated when you get home and just feel like a big lump of clay sitting there like, damn, I just want to just kind of get myself together here. Take that walk. Don't punk yourself out like, oh man, after that workout, I don't know if I can walk, man. Leg day. I always see people always talking about leg day like, oh, come on, man, really? So again,
my attitude is, man, no matter how tired you are, no matter how beat you are, you should be able to walk around the block.
And like I said, if you're not a freaking quadriplegic, someone that's confined to a wheelchair, walking is something you have to do every day. Okay, for the most part. So that's something that is first of all, appreciate the fact you can walk, because there are those who wish they could have that problem where they feel like, oh man, now I gotta go walk. So I always keep that in mind as well.
Who was a paraplegic, and they developed this mechanical device which actually helped him walk in an assisted manner. And he's like, man, I never want to sit down again. He's like, I just want to keep walking and walking and walking, because he'd been stuck sitting down all this time.
Yeah.
So, what's ironic and tragic in a lot of ways is how people try to avoid inactivity so much that now they're in a forced inactivity situation. Right. And they go, oh man, I wish I could be more active. It's like, well, you had fucking 40 years to be active. You didn't do shit with it. So your body said, oh, well, we might as well just sit on our ass all the time.
The body's like, well, I'm not going to keep beating this dead horse. I keep telling you I want to go out. And you're like, I want to watch TV. So, yeah, man.
It's the thing about something like this. Like, well, a lot of people are going to listen to this and be like, man, that's a great idea. What Mike and Sincere were talking about. Let's go do 2-mile walks every day. I can listen to a show. I can take my dogs out. And then months are going to go by. You haven't even done it once. Because it's easy to do. It's easy not to do, man. That's just the reality here.
In fact, it's so easy to do that when you actually hear us say this, as we're saying it, get up right then, and just start listening to the rest of the show.
Right now,
He's like, well, since you brought it up, go ahead and just go ahead and listen to the rest of the show on my phone and let me go and take this walk.
That's why I say you got to do it every fucking day, no matter what. Like yesterday, for example, I went to the dentist. I had a bunch of errands to run. It was it was at night. I'd already taken the dogs to the park. I hadn't done the walk though, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do it right now. Because I don't want one day to go by, because I want to build this habit of doing it every day. And I'm on maybe like day 10 of doing this, like just taking myself for a walk, basically. Separate from walking the dogs. So I got 2 older dogs. They can't walk along. My dog, Grover, he likes to go sprinting. So anyway, it's all separate activities. But to create a new habit, people often say, oh, you got to do it for 30 days. Bullshit. You got to do it for 90 days. You got to do it for 90. And same thing if you want to quit something. If you can quit something for 90 days, you can quit it for the rest of your life.
Why do you think when you get a job, they give you a 90-day probation period? Okay, because they're going to see if they really quit you after 90 days. So.
Well, the problem is you're going to be more reluctant to quit too after 90 days because you built the habit of the job. So it could be a job. It could be a job that sucks. And like during the first month, you're like, I should quit this fucking job. But after 90 days, you're like, oh well.
I made it this far, And they kept me, so that must say something, right?
That's the good and bad. Is like to develop a good habit, you got to do it for 3 months. But if you develop a bad habit and you do it for 3 months, it's going to be very difficult to quit it now.
Exactly, it works both ways, man. But there's another thing. Once it becomes a habit, man, it sucks when you miss that day.
Exactly. You look forward to it.
Because you're kind of addicted to it. Like, oh man, I didn't walk today. I didn't walk last night. Shh. And then you make an extra effort. Like, oh, I'm gonna make sure I get it today. It's I'm not gonna let anything get in my way, because you just kind of feel like, again, you feel like you missed out on something. You that experience where it felt good. It's like, oh, I like that feeling. Nothing's more addictive than feeling good, man.
Yeah, it's so true. Like everything we chase is to feel better, right? Whether it's a workout or a meal.
Even when we do negative things to ourselves, we lie to ourselves until it makes us feel better. Whether you're addicted to drugs or whatever else, for that one moment you felt good. It's coming off that high that sucked ass. Okay, that's the thing about it.
Well, the problem with bad habits is just the self-destructive mental side effects that come with it. And what I mean is, let's say like there's something you're trying to resist, whether it's gambling, it's whatever it is, it's some self-destructive habit, and you resist it and you feel better. You're building that mental fortitude. And then one day you give in. It's not just that you gave in, it's the way you're going to feel afterwards, that guilty feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or like, why did I do that, or I just messed up all this progress of resisting it. That is what can like lead to that spiraling.
You got to make sure you feel that void when you try to resist something. When you try to take something away, you got to put something in its place that's going to be better. So therefore, you're not going to have time to really think about the thing that you let go of. So, and a lot of times people just want to go cold turkey and then just like, I'm so glad that's, and just kind of you're happy with that moment that you removed something. Okay, there's a hole right there. That's that hole of a need for something. You got to put something else in that hole, man.
Look,
that was coming out. It's like you might want to.
You gotta put some. Right there. You can already see the memes being made right now. Sincere Hogan, like, look, if there's a hole, you gotta put something in it.
Holes weren't meant to be empty, man. Come on.
That's gonna be like a new pickup line. It's like, look, you got a hole.
Yeah, my brain was telling my mouth like, dude, shut him up, shut it up. Oh God, he let it out.
No, it's kind of like shutting your door and you're about to lock your car door. And you know the keys are in there, but because you're in the middle of doing it, you're like, oh well, let me just keep going. You got
to commit, man. Somebody, don't do anything half-ass, man. Do everything with your whole ass. Like my coach said, if you're gonna make a mistake, make it a good one, man.
Yeah. Speaking of that, that's a good segue into this next topic. I don't want to leave the listeners hanging because I promised this whole Jon Jones discussion. Speaking of mistakes, it's like, okay, many of you are a lot of you that are not UFC fans. You can go ahead and shut off right now. You're not going to care necessarily.
Just make sure you go both our websites and support the show. And
yeah, exactly. Make sure.
MikeMarler.com, to my newwarriortraining.com, patreon.com/LLA podcast. All right.
So, and one more thing is, leave a review on iTunes and Stitcher after every episode. Many of you are one-hitter quitters, right? You leave that review 3 years ago. You're still listening to the show. You've never left a review again. Well, look, you can leave a review after every episode if you want to, and that helps us. It helps us get more views. It helps us get better rankings, and it helps us keep the show free, because one thing we're working on is a pay model and somewhat of a free model. We'll get more into that as we get closer to it. Yeah. But the more numbers we get, the more inclined we are to keep the show free, because then it's good for other things we like to do.
So there you go. And use the coupon code LLA when you go to both our websites. So now, for you non-UFC fans, we'll see you on the next episode. UFC fans, here we go.
And those of you that are interested in just hormone optimization, you may find this interesting.
Yeah, you actually might get something else out of this besides just the whole aspect of MMA, because it can apply to other things as well.
Okay, so here's what happened with Jon Jones. As many of you know, he was not able to compete at UFC 200 because he popped positive for some banned substances. And it didn't come out until, I believe, last week or maybe early this week what the substances are. And the media keeps saying 2 estrogen blockers, which is technically true, but also factually incorrect, and I'll get into that. The 2 things that he popped positive for are Clomid and letrozole. So let's talk about Clomid first. Clomid is what's called a SERM, which is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. Just like we talked about SARMs a while back with Anthony Roberts, those are selective androgen receptor modulators. Okay, so what does that mean? It means it works on some areas to lower estrogen and not others. And that's a very important point. So technically, Clomid is an estrogen control product or an estrogen blocker or an estrogen modulator, however you want to define it, but no one takes it for the purpose of lowering estrogen, and here's why. The way Clomid works is that it lowers estrogen in your brain. Now, we're talking about men here, and as a result of that, a signal is sent from the brain to the testes to make more testosterone. Now, the reason why I think this happens is because your body's always looking for balance. So estrogen goes too low in men, estrogen goes up from the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. So by creating more testosterone, there's more opportunity for some of that to convert back to estrogen. So anyway, that's why this is happening. But the long short of this is that people take Clomid as a testosterone booster. So it increases, it's not a natural product like my aggressive strength testosterone booster, which, John, if you took, wouldn't have flagged those tests. It would have been nearly as effective, if not more effective. It would have been more effective because you would have had that payday and still be fighting. But the way Clomid increases testosterone naturally, so often it's used as an alternative to TRT, HCG, other mechanisms of increasing testosterone. That's the good with it. Now, the bad with it is that if you lower estrogen in the brain too much, there's a lot of very negative side effects. One being that you have mood decline. You just feel off. The other being that your sex drive could go down to zilch. I mean, no sex drive whatsoever, no sex function whatsoever. Now, I actually did an interesting experiment with Clomid, so I do have some personal experience with it. After we had Dr. Mark Gordon on the show, I looked into it a little bit further, and I wanted to compare how Clomid worked for me versus my testosterone booster. So I'm like, okay, this is perfect. I haven't used my T booster for about 8 weeks right now. Instead of starting another cycle, I'm going to try this Clomid, use it for 4 weeks, get some blood work, and then see how it compares. Now, I wasn't able to complete this test, and I'll tell you why. Because I couldn't stay on this for longer than 2 weeks because I felt horrible. I felt terrible. You know, first week, not really much benefit. No, I didn't feel good or bad one way or the other. The second week, I noticed that my mood was off, and I'm already prone to mild depression as it is. So anything that throws my mood off is a big red flag for me. It's a big concern. And then sex drive took a big hit, and no guy likes his sex drive taking a big hit. All right, so you're not going to just suffer through that. It's like, you know what? I'll just deal with this.
Nor his women.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to just. You're not going to have the mentality of I'm just going to deal with this for the next 6 weeks. I don't care what the upside is.
Right.
And what's the point of taking a testosterone booster if your sex drive goes down, right? It's a real irony right there in that you're taking a product that increases your testosterone, but because it lowers estrogen in your brain, even though your testosterone levels are higher, I never measured to confirm or one way or the other, but it does work and the literature supports that. My testosterone was likely higher, but because the estrogen was so much lower in the brain, the sex drive took a huge hit. So this is a separate point I want to make here is the goal, men, is not to get testosterone as high as possible and estrogen as low as possible. You need to have a balance between the two. And it's basically a 30 to 50 to 1 ratio of testosterone to estrogen. If your estrogen dips too low, it will have serious consequences on your sex drive, your mood, and also can have a negative impact on cholesterol, your bone health, just a lot of other spirals that go with it. You have to realize that we have this hormone for a reason. People often say, okay, estrogen is a female hormone, which is not really true because men have it as well. And testosterone is a male hormone. It's like, okay, well, women have it. So we have both of these things. We just have a lot more. Men should have a lot more testosterone than women, and women should have a lot more estrogen than men. But we need both. All right, so anyway, that's what Clomid does. So basically, the benefit of taking Clomid is that it's a testosterone booster. Not everyone is going to have this side effect that I mentioned, but it can be common, and it's certainly something to look out for. Now, the other product that he popped for is called letrozole. Now, letrozole is an extremely powerful aromatase inhibitor, which means that it blocks the conversion of testosterone to estrogen by lowering an enzyme called aromatase. It's given to breast cancer, women with breast cancer, because that's an estrogen-dominant condition, and it actually has a lot of benefits there. Now, the dose that they take is about 5 milligrams per day, depending on the doctor, the condition, etc. Any guy who takes that, you don't even want to take that much in a week. That's how potent this stuff is. So a man taking this for the purpose of blocking testosterone to estrogen, you're going to take about 0.5 milligrams to 1 milligram every other day. So we're looking at 3 milligrams or so per week, right? So you don't even take this daily. And some can take it even a lot less than that, depending on what your estrogen levels are. You may have estrogen that's a little bit too high. So you take maybe 0.5 milligrams per week, as opposed to someone who may have severe estrogen dominance who may take the stronger potent size of this, which is 1 milligram 3 times per week. Now, there really isn't a reason to take something like this unless you're taking anabolics to block conversion to lower the excess estrogen, or possibly Clomid, because even though Clomid on paper is an estrogen blocker, it only blocks estrogen in the brain, not elsewhere. So you can have low estrogen in the brain, you have high estrogen elsewhere, and you can develop gyno, or as our friend Ori Hofmeckler would say, beach teats, by taking Clomid. So even though it lowers estrogen in the brain, it doesn't lower estrogen elsewhere. So it can be a real clusterfuck of a situation, right, where you take Clomid and your estrogen in your brain goes down, so you feel terrible and your sex drive is low, but your testosterone goes way up. And that converts into estrogen elsewhere, which causes bitch tits. Now imagine the situation of you have no sex drive, you have poor mood, your testosterone level is high, but you have bitch tits. It's just a bad situation here, man. So these aren't things that you play around with, man, right? Like someone who's thinking about taking Clomid, you want to go to a doctor like Dr. Mark Gordon, who does a thorough exam to make sure it's a fit. Honestly, and I know I'm biased because I sell my testosterone booster, but that's definitely something you should consider taking before something like Clomid, because the aggressive strength testosterone booster is not going to lower estrogen in the brain, and it's not going to lower it too much. It has mild estrogen blocking properties, which you want in a testosterone booster. But I've never had anyone take aggressive strength, and this is out of thousands of people who have ever reported that their estrogen levels went too low on it. So that's something to be thinking. And then for someone who does have high estrogen, that's why I have EC. Sometimes if you take EC and the aggressive strength testosterone booster, your estrogen levels can go too low. I actually have to be cautious with EC myself because my estrogen is in an optimal range without taking anything, really. So I like to take maybe 1 cap a couple times a week myself just to maintain that. If I go to 3 caps a day or even 2 caps a day, I find my estrogen goes too low. And I don't even need a blood test to confirm this because I know what low estrogen feels like just from the mood side effects. Yeah. All right, so why was he taking these two things together? Back to Clomid and letrozole. Why take both together? Well, for the reasons I just said. Clomid, you have to look at it as a testosterone booster, and then letrozole as an estrogen blocker from the testosterone conversion to estrogen with Clomid. Now, the next question is, he claims he didn't knowingly take these substances. That may be true, and I think there's a good chance that is true. Just from looking at the way he acted at the press conference, he's either an Academy Award winning actor, he put on an Academy Award acting performance. He's a great liar. These are all possible things. He could be the best liar in the world.
It's been shown before, when him and DC first started, with their little rivalry.
I felt like he may just be sad because he got caught, right?
He may be sad because that estrogen is really off. Those tears. Here's the thing about another thing about psychology. When people are faking and they cry, they usually only can cry from one eye. Okay. He had some boo-boo tears coming from both eyes. Right. They were really, really red. Okay. I don't know if it was just because, I got caught, or it was like, damn, this really sucked. I didn't know, or I lost a lot of damn money over this crap, and my legs may be actually tarnished now.
Here's why I don't think he knowingly took it. At his age and just the way he looks physically, there's really no reason. The benefits of taking this for someone in his situation are nowhere near worth it. So either he got some extremely bad advice, which is definitely possible, right? There's a lot of bad advice out there. But it doesn't really make sense for someone in his situation to be taking any of these things. Now, some say, okay, well, maybe he took these after a cycle of anabolics to get his levels back to normal, and that's certainly possible. And some idiots even say that he took these to mask anabolics, which is not possible and completely improbable. It's not going to mask anything. And the whole point of a masking agent is so that you don't get caught on a test. Right? You don't want so basically
not to enhance the problem, make it be even more visible.
He took two banned substances to mask other banned substances. What's the point of doing that? Either way, you're screwed. So you get a lot of dumb arguments out there on the internet. I remember some people were even saying, he took this testosterone booster from a company that he's sponsored by, which has DIM in it, and that's an aromatase inhibitor. It's like, DIM is made from fucking broccoli. All right? You're not going to eat broccoli and score hot on a performance test. DIM is a natural substance. It's not on the banned list. And it's also questionable whether it's even an aromatase inhibitor. It's not a powerful estrogen blocker at all. It's an estrogen metabolizer, meaning that it improves the ratio of good to bad estrogen. So that's a separate topic that we go on forever. But the whole point is that that's a flawed argument or a discussion point to even bring into this. Now, here's what I think happened. My feeling is that he did take a tainted supplement because the supplement industry is notorious for this kind of stuff. I put up a link on Twitter the other day from the FDA website, and it was a list of all of the tainted products that they have tested. And there were hundreds of products on here. Most of them were boner pills. So a lot of people buy these herbal boner pills, and they're going, okay, I want an alternative Viagra or Cialis. Cheaper. And guess what? You're getting Viagra or Cialis. You might as well just go buy Viagra or Cialis than buying something that you think is an alternative, and it turns out that it actually is that, or some similar analog to that. And there's just hundreds of products on there. But there were also some sports supplement company products on there that did have different steroids or stuff like Clomid and letrozole in it. So sometimes you're buying what you think is an over-the-counter natural estrogen blocker product, and it actually has letrozole or Remedex or something like that in it. Because think about it. You only need to have 0.5 milligrams a couple times a week of letrozole to be effective. You could easily add that to any product you want to sell without missing a beat. Same thing with Clomid. Clomid, you only need about 25 milligrams every other day or even twice a week. So these are low-dose products that you could easily add to something without it being obvious that there's something added to it, where a 500 milligram capsule all of a sudden becomes 1,000 milligrams because you just added a bunch of stuff in. Now, if you go to an FDA-approved lab to make your supplements, like I do, like these reputable labs, they will not make the product for you when they do their certificate of analysis, and it turns out that you have illegal products in it or gray area products in it. They're just not going to deal with that because if you get sued, they can get sued, right? So even from a ethical standpoint, even if they don't care about that, they don't want to get sued. They want to stay in business. So they're going to test and make sure that you don't have things in there that are going to get them in trouble. And that's good for you, too, because, frankly, if there's something in there that I don't want in there, I want to know that. I'm not going to go to production and just pass it on to the customer. I'll eat the cost of that. I use these products myself. I want them to be safe. I have friends who use these products, family members who use my supplements. I want to make sure that it's safe and that what's on the label is the only thing that's in the actual product. So anyway, where I'm going is that this situation could have been easily avoided if Jon only took supplements that had a certificate of analysis from a third-party lab that confirmed this is what's on the label, this is what's in it, and that's all that's in it. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why a professional athlete wouldn't have that as the bare bone minimum way to protect yourself.
Well,
frankly,
a lot of times they depend on their coaches and their team. Pretty much, these guys just show up to work out. Tell me what to do, coach. And that's pretty much what they do. They're very hands off. Not just athletes. Even you see that just even with money with celebrities. I just let my accountant handle it or my people handle it because all they want to do is just go in and do what needs to be done for whatever they're doing as their profession. They don't want to deal with all that other stuff. So they feel like my nutritionist or my coach or whatever, he's handling that. He's a professional. That's what I pay him for. I trust him, to handle that.
And that's not, I mean, and they should be able to trust whoever's around them. So you got to make sure you hire the right person. I mean, Jon doesn't have time to deal with this stuff. He's training several times a day. He's working on his craft, and then he's got to go get research supplement companies and get COAs and all of that stuff. No, of course he has to delegate that responsibility to someone else. But now the onus is on that person to make sure they do these things. Right. Frankly, I would go a step beyond a COA. I would probably, just from a standpoint of paranoia, have whatever product I'm thinking about using, I would probably have analyzed by a third-party lab myself just to make sure there isn't anything in it. Because think about it. Jon missed out on a $30 million payday.
Yeah.
That's the estimate at UFC 200. It wouldn't have cost more than a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 even just to make sure everything you're taking is legit.
Yeah, and that $30 million is just estimate from that payday of that fight alone, not counting possible loss of endorsements now after this. Because
and he may be out of the game.
Themselves from him because of this.
That's right.
On top of the other troubles he just recently came back from. So.
I mean, and then he may be out of the game for 2 years. That's all. That's going to be missed earnings. The supplement company that he is sponsored by, GAD, they immediately issued a statement saying, "Hey, it's not our stuff." So I hope they have COAs to prove that because they can easily deflect responsibility over there. Right. So what Jon needs to do now is make sure hopefully he has product of everything that he has taken for this camp and maybe even the last several camps just to be on the safe side. Exactly. And you send those in to a third-party lab and see if anything pops hot. Hopefully something does because the suspension will be a lot lower if that's what happens. Right. Because Yoel Romero, right, he popped hot for something as well. And it actually turned out to be a SARM, one of the SARMs that we talked about with Anthony Roberts, called Osterin. Now, Osterin is legal to use as a consumer, but it's a banned product in most sports, but it's in the UFC in particular. So anyway, he popped hot for that. And he did take a supplement that had Osterin in it, but it wasn't on the label. So this is what I'm going back to, a tainted product. So you're buying something, you're like, wow, this stuff works. And it's like, yeah, it works, but not because of what's on the label. That's the problem. So you keep taking this thing thinking that you're protected, thinking that these supplement companies did their due diligence and they're ethical and they care about you, which a lot of good companies are, including mine. But a lot don't give a fuck. A lot of them just want to make money.
Right.
And they're going to make money by the easiest path to making money is being lazy and just throwing stuff in there that is either illegal or a banned product because you know that it's effective. So in this case, Osterin was in it. They were able to prove that it was in their product. They worked out a deal with USADA where he only got 6 months suspension as opposed to 2 years. Right. Tim Means is another guy. He popped hot for a supplement, and it had Osterin in it as well. So he also managed to get a reduced sentence because of this. And I've noticed that Jon has hired the same lawyer that worked with Yoel and Tim Means. So it's obviously they're going to build a defense that's very similar to what those two guys did. And I really hope as a fan and also someone that would hate to see someone like Jon not earn out of making a mistake that he wasn't even aware of, unbeknowingly to him. I hope that something that he took did have these things in it so that it can clear it for him and he only gets 6 months and he's back fighting early next year. Right. Is it possible that some supplement he took had these things in it? Absolutely. And hopefully that's what it will turn out in the next month or two as this process unravels. But man, talk about a big waste of time, a big waste of money, and just an unnecessary nuisance hassle to deal with because you weren't willing to do a few preemptive measures.
Right, the due diligence,
Honestly, I don't know if it's worth any professional athlete taking any supplement, to tell you the truth. If you're a UFC fighter, you're better off just eating food.
You're trying to eat food and drink water, man.
Yeah, because anything could be tainted. I'm not saying that I don't believe my supplements are tainted. I do believe I do the proper measures to ensure they're not, but nothing is 100% foolproof. I mean, something could get in there. Who knows? Something could get in there from maybe the manufacturing plant. Something was
cross-pollinated from another product they have going on in there.
Well, that's why you want to only work with manufacturing plants that don't make those products. But what if they made a mistake?
Right.
And it was an innocent mistake, and as a result of that mistake, you get hit with this. That's why they have heavy insurance. That's why you have insurance. Everyone's out to protect themselves, which we should do. But it's one of those things where if you're a UFC fighter, you have to look at what is the upside of me taking some supplements, and is it worth the potential risk of me being banned? There are a lot of good supplements out there, but frankly, none of them are game changers.
Right.
Including mine. Mine are great, but they're not going to be game changers for professional athletes who are already genetically gifted, that it's worth taking the risk.
Exactly. It's a $30 million mistake, man. That sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Now, apparently you can tell USADA all of the products you're taking ahead of time, because they generally keep lists themselves. So I'm like, in other words, they'll look at the FDA database and say, well, we recommend you don't take this because it's on this. The problem with the FDA database is that that's not preemptive. Those are products that are already on the market.
Exactly. So you start having what's her name? Maria Sharapova type situation.
Yeah.
There was, she's been cheating all along. Like, no, that thing just got listed back in January.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's very recent, even though she's used it for like 10 years.
That situation was ridiculous because she's taking it for a health reason.
Exactly.
A legitimate health issue reason. And it was only banned at the beginning of the year where she was tested for, and she just wasn't aware of that, and then she got pinched for that. Come on. She wasn't taking it for some purpose. It's only going to – now, there are performance-enhancing aspects of what she took. I forget the name of it. But only for healthy people who don't have the issue she has.
Right.
So in her particular case, it's just going to even things out for her so that it's an even playing field for her and her opponents. For someone who's already healthy who took it, then it could give somewhat of a competitive edge.
Right.
So anyway, that was just a witch hunt because she's a big name.
Right.
They wanted to make an example out of someone and blow it out of proportion.
And make themselves look good when usually they turn a blind eye to this, because it's money. They want these big names to continue to make money for them. But then when, all eyes are on them, we've talked about this in other episodes. Like every now and then they got to have their scapegoat to see, we're doing something. We're not just turning a blind eye to this thing.
Right. I think after Lance Armstrong, there's a little bit of paranoia now.
Right.
Where it's like anyone gets popped for anything, it's like, you throw the whole book at them
right.
as a way to protect your own ass because he got away with stuff for so long. Not only does that show that he's a good liar, but these governing bodies, it makes them look like a bunch of incompetent idiots.
And it wasn't just him, it was just like, his team. And then the teams before that is just like, oh, so y'all just really incompetent. It's not just one guy. You've had like all these multiple winners and their entire teams. Like, oh, no, we were doing something. We didn't know. Like, come on, man.
But what was funny, though, is like back to Jon Jones, with the argument of maybe he took these things after a cycle. First of all, you're not going to take an estrogen blocker like letrozole after a cycle because the goal after a cycle of anabolics is to balance out your hormones, not drive estrogen into the ground. So that's the last thing you're going to take. You're going to take letrozole while you're on a cycle, not after a cycle. Clomid you will take after a cycle to rejuvenate your levels. But like I said, that's not the only purpose for it. It can also be used as a testosterone booster. Now, if Jon actually took anabolics, why didn't that ever show up on any USADA test?
Right.
Given how diligent they are with the testing, I mean, they caught him here with this. Why wouldn't they have caught him with something else?
Yeah, exactly.
Before, like maybe for the OSP fight. Because some were going, oh, this explains why he got so strong during the powerlifting. It's like, no, dumb fuck.
It's called weights.
Yeah, exactly.
Programming. And
Brian,
especially when you're doing something that you don't normally do.
Exactly.
So, of course, those results are going to be more readily shown because that's not what he normally did.
You're a sponge sucking that in, man. Like, you take someone who's never worked out before and they go to the gym, it's going to be Gainesville for like the next 6 months.
Right.
Like Brian Stan made a point of saying, man, Jon is such a good fighter. I was like, when I used to train with him, I would think, man, you should lift some weights. You should do some of these things. It would make such a big difference in your program. And he never did. So he said that when he saw Jon start training, he's like, yeah, I'm not surprised that he's packing on so much size so quickly because he's such a genetically gifted guy that all he had to do was allocate some time and effort to that. He had good coaching at the gym he went to. He had nothing else to do, but focus on powerlifting because he couldn't compete. And then he got the iron bug. Like, he started getting results, and then he really dedicated himself to it.
Right.
And also, the results he got, while impressive, are not beyond the scope of what can be achieved naturally by any, especially for a genetically gifted guy. I mean, Jon walks around at 230, and he was deadlifting 585 and squatting 500 pounds. We just had Eric Cressey on the show, who weighed 165 and deadlifts 600 for reps and squats 540. Okay, so I mean,
he's my height. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Eric's
Eric's a natural lifter, and I don't think he would consider himself some genetically gifted guy. He's just a hard worker and a very smart coach. So he learned how to get strong. He's a very good at programming, not only for others, but clearly for himself as well. So, I mean, back to Jon, it's not like those numbers are so ridiculous. Like, he's breaking powerlifting records for his weight class. You know, that he wouldn't even place in the top 100 if he competed with those numbers in his weight class. So they're not. So the average person who can't even get off the couch, couldn't deadlift 100 pounds to save their life. Yeah, sure, it looks like all the weight in the world. But for someone who's a genetically gifted athlete who dedicated some time to something he's never done before, it's certainly within the realm of possibility. So anyway, I doubt he was taking a bunch of anabolics, is where I'm going, to improve his powerlifting numbers.
Right.
Now, it's possible that there's more tests out there that haven't come back yet. Like Chael Sonnen said that when he got popped for HCG, and I think he might have been taking Clomid too, he said he was worried because he knew there were other tests out there that hadn't come back for other stuff he was taking. And he was very honest about this on, I think, his show and also Joe Rogan's podcast. So it's possible that there's 2 other tests out there that come back. And if that happens, it's over, man.
It's done.
Oh, it's over. It's over. No one's going to believe, oh, well, I think it was another tainted supplement I took. It's like, well, look, man, you have the worst luck in the world with supplements because everything you take is fucking tainted. So anyway, like I said, I hope it's a tainted product, and I hope we see Jon back in action soon because I was really pissed off that he didn't make that fight, man. And you know what? I couldn't be pissed off for too long because there were so many horrendous things happening that week that were much worse than
UFC,
a fighter missing a UFC. That obviously it wasn't something that I focused on for too long. But for the night that I found out it happened, I was pretty pissed off, man, because I really wanted to see that rematch, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too.
Actually, with all the other stuff that was going on, that was a welcome distraction to be pissed off about. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a luxury distraction. It's like
exactly.
It's a luxury.
Thank you for pissing me off about this, okay? At least no one died, okay?
Right. So, man, it's just a crazy world we're in right now.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I sent over that clip with actually, you know what? We can save that for another episode, man.
Yeah.
We don't need to go on another tangent now.
Yeah, because that right there won't be a short discussion.
yeah, exactly. It'd be like another hour of us talking about that. We'll talk about that further down the line. So anyway, folks, that was some bonus material for you guys who are curious about this whole Jon Jones situation, and maybe you're curious about the substances he took, and that's just a introduction to what they're used for and what they're all about. Don't send me a bunch of emails on where to get the stuff, all right? Because not once did I recommend any of this stuff. In fact, if any of you that are thinking about Clomid, I'm hoping that I gave you some concern to do some more due diligence before you just jump on stuff.
Right. And don't email Mike and say, hey, man, can you get it for me?
Yeah. But that's definitely not going to happen. I'm not going to break the law for you. I'm not even going to tell you how to break the law. You're going to have to go research that on your own.
There's our disclaimer there.
All right, folks. So support the show. Use that coupon code LLA. Go to MikeMahler.com, NewWarriorTraining.com. Get 10% off. Go load up on some great nutrition supplements that you're not going to pop hot for. But again, if you're a professional athlete still, be a little bit concerned. I'm not saying that any of my stuff is tainted. It definitely isn't. But there's no real way to be 100% foolproof with anything in life. So it's just you have to take it upon yourself to do whatever you need to do to ensure safety for you.
There you go. And then head over to patreon.com/LLA podcast. Become a monthly supporter of the show. And here's the thing. This little bonus that we had right here after speaking with Eric, this pays off well. Just giving you guys a hint, a big hint, exactly. That, those, supporting like they do on Patreon are doing, these bonus episodes, bonus parts of the show becomes just that, a bonus. So these type of discussions, these type of topics and things like that, yeah, they'll pay off They're going to pay off.
There's some intricacies with moving to a pay model that we had to work out.
Yeah.
We've had some great discussions on it, and I think we've come to a model that's going to be everyone's going to be happy about this model, including us.
Yeah.
The only people that aren't going to be happy are people that we don't care if they're happy or not.
Yeah.
Your happiness is not something we're concerned about because you don't support us. So I mean, anyway, we'll get into this on an episode down the line as we get closer to transitioning to this model.
Exactly. All right, folks. And then as Mike mentioned earlier, head over to Stitcher and iTunes, man. Leave that review. You just listened to the episode. Now you can go leave that review right now.
Exactly.
There you go. You can do that right now. No, like right now. What are you waiting for? Get off your ass. Come on.
Why are you still listening? Go.
All right, folks. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Bye.